maybe turn the heat. is slow. And that one's fast.
Yeah.
Did you purposely set it fast?
No, Jing Fosher did though.
Ah. Okay, we're continuing with chapter 9 of the Avatamsaka Sutra and try to do 2 verses tonight. Pick up the pace a little bit, not too much. My text, we're picking up again on page 17. And I'll try to read the Chinese first. And please bear with me, those of you who really are good at Chinese or know Chinese. But I'd like to do this. This was a practice that my teacher did too, to read the Chinese text in the original, then read the English translation, and then begin a discussion. He would lecture also, his discussion would go in Chinese, and that was translated. I like to keep up that practice because there's some people who maybe don't know English but know Chinese and get to hear the text just one time, once a week, which is really a gift to the consciousness. So, and then it also allows people who know enough that they want to get engaged with the translation to look at the original. And of course, in our translation of these verses, the meter and the rhythm is lost because we're going for as close as we can get to meaning, so the lyricism of the verses is not there, but it remains in the Chinese until I read it, and then the lyricism and the rhythm and all the beauty is gone. It's clunk clunk. But here we go. 导师向中模，永见无能胜，光中圆妙义，四辈故如师，一不智慧心，破除烦恼障，一念见一切，此是佛身力。This is, I'll first read I'm assuming that people have the text here, they're looking at the same one. Okay, yeah, so, and then if somebody's taking notes, if we make some suggestions or changes, either we can keep a record of that, or maybe do this in footnotes as well. But basically the English would say, then the guiding master subdues the multitudes of demons. He is courageous, strong, and invincible. Within the light, he proclaims a wonderful meaning. He is this way because of his kindness and compassion. Using the mind of wisdom to smash all afflictions and obstacles, in one thought, you could see all. This is the spiritual power, I would say, of a Buddha. And not the. So those are some translation things I want to look at. As we go into tonight, I'm just thinking aloud. I want to pay attention to the guiding master, the subduing and demons. Talk a little bit about that. Again, a little more about the light, that phrase within the light. I'm trying to think where's the Chinese for that? That's Guangzhong. So light within Zhong, literal. And then the other one I want to look at in the second verse is the smashing of all afflictions and obstacles. There's no way we can talk about everything in a text in one night, but these are some of the things that sort of jumped out at me, and different things will affect different people. And I'm going to leave a little time tonight for one of the monks to also talk tonight. So, where we are in the text, I know it's been a long time, and so I'd like to, each class sort of get us back into what's happening in this chapter. We're continuing with the idea that everything that's revealed in this light, that's the actual phrase from the text, everything all was revealed in this light that the Buddha emitted. And we talked about that as being both a light of wisdom and perhaps something even more real than metaphor that's happening with greatly enlightened beings whose radiance and whose luminosity, and with that ability to clarify things in terms of principles and in their eloquence, but also in a more noumenal or visceral or less concrete way, create a space of brightness and goodness and unobstructed brilliance. I don't know how else to describe. I'm using metaphors, but there's a feeling that you get as if the sun were to come out brightly after a storm when you're in the presence of someone like this. And then because of that light, everything takes on a new clarity and even new dimension. The text also says the bright light that illuminates. These are phrases from it. So this chapter is devoted to that idea of this light. And what it's illuminating, apparently, if we go through, look earlier, it's worlds and beings within those worlds. And the phenomena surrounding all of that make up what we call the nature of reality. So it's actually a bright revelation of the many, many layers of what true reality is, including all the 10 Dharma Realms, including, they say, worlds without measure going on in billions of billions of billions of multitude throughout a measure of time and space that's incalculable. So this nature of reality being described in the text, Buddhas and these bodhisattvas are able to see it as clearly as we see our environment here. Or, I mean, it's presuming we see our environment clearly, but to the degree that we think we have a grasp on what the world is, we're only seeing a small sliver of that. Not because our capacity is not that of full illumination, but our functioning is not there. And because we cover over that light. So without this light, we only see it dimly or obscured or not at all. So when some people read this text, some people or some beings have a response of, wow, yes, of course, that's how it is. It's really great to see someone confirming and validating what I know to be. Other people say, sometimes I get this feeling it's like that, and then it evaporates. It's like waking up from a dream. It's there, but then I apply some kind of effort in my consciousness and I can't seem to keep it or hold it. But sometimes when I meditate or when I'm bowing or when I'm really calm, I'll get glimmers of this, but then it evaporates. It all depends on not that nature keeps shifting or changing. It is in flux, that's true. But there's a constancy to it, these worlds that are described, the 10 Dharma Realms. It's because of one state of mind or one state of being that it seems to be there, not there, clear, not clear. It's sometimes so direct you feel as if you could touch it, and at other times a mystical dream or almost like a poetic fantasy. But this is meant not metaphorically. I want to say that again. Even though you can do that with a text and it's kind of fun and you'll get something out of this, so you view it as allegory and metaphor and how should we say it, facsimile, but not literal. But that is not how it is presented. It can be taken that way and you can use it that way and that's fine. But it's actually saying this is actually something real. I don't know how I say that. But again, when I was working with my teacher, he would say it's not a matter of faith that you must believe this or that the only way you can get a hold on this is through faith. It's rather something you see directly. But until you see it directly, you don't have to accept it or reject it. You just merely get into a position where it's saying, wow, that's really mind-boggling. What would I have to do? How would I have to change in order to comprehend or encompass that? As opposed to waiting for something to happen that it could be revealed. So his point was that this way of cultivating yourself, basically polishing your mirror, polishing your lens, all this will become very obvious over time, and then you accept or whatnot. In the meantime, you take it as a hypothesis, as something interesting. You don't have to blindly accept it and affirm to others that there are 10 Dharma realms, and in these realms are all these beings. And how do you know that? I just believe. Well, you don't have to do that, nor do you have to say, because I can't see it right now, I reject it as offhand and it couldn't possibly exist. Both of those are two extremes that I would say a balanced or a good inquiring mind would want to avoid and just sort of stay in the middle. The Manjushri comes out as very central in this text here. He plays many roles. Obviously, he's known as the Bodhisattva of wisdom, of great wisdom. In this place, he's serving as what I would call an interlocutor. I don't know if you're familiar with that expression. Interlocutor, literally between voice, a voice between. I guess in some stage productions, whether they're Greek or even early minstrel shows in the United States, you had an interlocutor, and literally it was a person who was placed in the center of everybody else, who would, at times, be speaking to the people on the stage, giving them cues and challenging them and saying things, but also speaking to the audience and telling the audience a little bit what was going on. So it's sort of a bridge between the audience and the stage, but also like an MC is another way you could look at it. So I say this with all due respect. Manjushri's the MC here, okay? And he's a bridge to the stage, from the stage to the audience. And what he's doing is he's detailing with these verses. He goes over, there's a prose section first and then the verse, and he details this, he explains it, he articulates it again, and he interprets. You could say, in a modern sense, he's a reporter on the scene. He's there in media res, in the middle of the action. And he is speaking out. Now, who's he speaking to? Well, apparently, it's not clear in the text who he's speaking to. It's just saying he spoke these verses. He's obviously probably speaking to those there, and we see this in other texts where Manjushri or other bodhisattvas are there to interpret phenomena to those who can see it but can't understand it. You see this in the Lotus Sutra, for example. Suddenly, magnificent things happen along these lines with flowers and lights and shaking and trembling of the earth and so forth. And nobody knows what this means. But Manjushri says, oh, don't worry, this has happened before. Usually when this happens, the Buddha's about to do this. And he frames it for people to understand. So in this case, he's our reporter, he's our interlocutor, he's the MC. But I want to stress this here. He's not just reporting, or some people say these are verses in praise. Verses in praise. even if they are verses in praise which they seem to be, extolling the virtues of enlightened beings, he's not praising them to get something back. If you understand, sometimes we say, I'm going to make an offering to the Buddhas, or I'm going to praise the Buddhas. And then in our kind of, not quite superstitious mind, but sort of ordinary mind, we think, and they will like that. They will be really happy. And in return, they will reward me or give me what I want. This is not what praising is about. The reason he could be, say, praising or describing is not for the Buddhas. It's for us. It's for those present. And it's rather he's teaching, he's instructing, he's mapping out a path of awakening for everyone. So this is really what we have to understand here. We have to pause at this point, because you can gloss over this. Manjushri said, and you can just do the blah, 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 the verse, blah, 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 this, without realizing that this is actually an existential teaching directly to people probably without limit on time or culture. And so part of our reading or part of our interpreting exercise is to understand, what is he teaching? What is he instructing? What is he mapping out for us? Because the Buddhas already have accomplished these things. So not only is he telling us what these virtues are that are inherent with us and that we need to cultivate, but he's actually highlighting those so we pay attention to them, and then perhaps even more how we do that. So this we have to see, step back and not see it as a religious scripture that's praising the deities or the Buddhas or Bodhisattvas, but more as a mapping of human consciousness and the pathways or the parameters or the activities that human consciousness can engage in to perfect itself. This is really important to understand it that way. So this is very important that way as a text. It's almost like he is giving us in this envelope that's sealed everything we need to know to become fully awakened. So if it's obscure or not clear, it's only to the degree that our own mind or nature has been obscured or concealed. So I want to reverse and say, some people say, oh, this is mystical, it's obscurantist, it's out there, and only you can get it with special states of consciousness. Some people say with certain mushrooms, other people say, well, with certain kinds of concentrated meditation trances and so forth. I don't think this is what it's talking about. I think rather, and we'll see from these verses, it's not that it is obscure, it's because we are obscured. And it's not because it's hidden, it's because we have concealed or hidden away or forgotten our own light. Very different approach here. We withdraw or remove ourselves from observing things as they really are. Let me say that again, because I think what precepts and meditation are about are exercises of returning ourselves to a direct observation of things as they really are. And normally, when we get attached to things and driven by our greed and our anger and our emotions, we're withdrawing our consciousness, we're withdrawing our light from the observation that is here. Now, this is a very high level of observation. But still, it is the nature of things as they really are. So we cover over keep from sight. And that's what I think is, for me, important to understand what the text is about. Also, it's not just mine. The thing I really loved about my teacher's commentary on the sutras, and I find this when I see other people send letters or memos or emails about why they like the commentary, is because they say it's so direct, it's so accessible, it's so human. Because you could lecture this sutra in a sort of far out, heavenly, obscure, poetic language and make it all seem as if it were transcendental, okay? And I think, and he did this purposely with us. I'll read you a commentary, part of a commentary that he gave on this. I may have said it before, but it's worth saying again. Here I'm quoting, "The principles discussed in the sutra, the Avatamsaka, are designed to correct our faults and bad habits." Wow, that is not transcendental, that's right here. "It is absolutely not the case that the sutra was dharma spoken for bodhisattvas with no relationship to us, or that it was spoken for arhats with no relevance for us." Arhats and bodhisattvas being stages of fairly high level awakening. "Don't think," he says this, and he quotes, all I as an ordinary person can do is listen to the sutra. I could never aspire to the states of a sage," unquote. To think that way is to throw yourself away, to separate yourself from the sages. Consequently, in our daily investigation and lecturing of the Avatamsaka Sutra, it's essential to rely upon the sutra's principles to cultivate and use the sutra as a cure for our own personal faults. This is really, really clear. Even though at first we read this and we say, oh, he's just talking to bodhisattvas about bodhisattva stages, what Master Hua is saying here is that this is a humanistic text. It's about the human. It comes from the human, it points to the human, and it's for the human. Those who are greedy after hearing the Avatamsaka should rid themselves of greed. People who have hatred and anger upon hearing the sutra should give up their anger and hatred. And those who are foolish and stupid should stop being foolish and stupid. I mean, he's actually saying pragmatically, this is the outcome if you're reading the text right. Okay, so I just give this as a background where we're framing and where we're coming at this. And what I'm trying to do in this tradition is to bring it back to these aspects of accessibility. The text, the guiding master subdues the multitudes of demons, courageous, strong, and invincible. Within the light, he proclaims the wonderful meaning. He is this way because of kindness and compassion. Very important lines here, but first, I think it's important to see, not just pass over the language of the guiding master. He's not a commanding master. He's not a dictating or controlling master. You know, it's like, master, whatever you say. He's a guiding master, which means there's this element of inducing, leading, of educating, rather than dictating. So this is important because then you understand here, when I'm going to these existential principles, the master can only guide. It's not that he guides, but he could actually just sort of tell you, oh, today I'm going to make you enlightened. It's not like that. It's actually suggesting in this very line that the only way you will get to what Master Hua is saying, the stages of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, is by actually doing it yourself, cultivating according to the teachings. So the master can only guide, he can't give. Multitudes of demons. I don't know how much I want to spend on that tonight. Some other night, okay, so multitudes of demons. I suppose we can say a little bit about the multitudes of demons. Not going into too much. Basically, I'm just going to cut it down. Buddhism talks about demons as four kinds usually. There's the demons of klesha, of one's afflictions. And then there's demons which are associated with illness. And there's demons associated with death and dying. And then there's something called tianmo, heavenly demons. These are four broad categories. If you look at them, you could say, where are they? Are they inside or are they outside? Are they internal or are they external? And I think my teacher in the text would say yes. They are. They're both. They can be either, they can be or they can be both, or some combination. If you look at this, the afflictions, illness, and demon of death are very accessible and in the human experience. And especially the first one, it's basically saying, these are the demons of your own making. These are the things that you have tied yourself up with to the point that you are possessed almost. Okay? The last one, tianmo, heavenly demons, are, if you want to say, more of an external entity or energy. Some people metaphorically interpret them as manifestations of the baser, not noble passions in the human mind. And therefore they're a symbolic device. And you could read many texts this way. By the way, these are not unique to Buddhism. The span of demons runs across not only all religious, but almost all literary traditions as well. Even what we call pre-world religions. You will see this manifest. I remember I was doing a course with some novice monks who, it was kind of an undergraduate thing, and I thought, well, we'll read the Bible, because they've never read the Bible. They were Buddhist monks, and they didn't. And it's like, they really got into it. It was like, wow, it was really interesting. We went through parts of the Old Testament and the New Testament, and they had never before imagined. But what was wonderful about it is I grew up with the Bible. I thought I knew the Bible. But when they read it through different, fresh eyes than I read it before. It was really interesting. It's like, oh, yeah, I guess that's there. They say not only is there, but it dominates. And so one thing they did, because they were studying the Shurangama Sutra at the same time, which also talks about demons. So those of you who are encouraged to learn about these demons, there's a whole section at the end of the Shurangama Sutra called the 50 Skanda Demons. And each skanda, form, feelings, what you might call habituated activities, formations, form, feelings, thought, consciousness itself, these 5 skandhas, when you are cultivating and really practicing, you peel away layers of attachment in those skandhas. They start to drop away as you get back to pure, clear, awakened consciousness. But if you're not careful when you're doing that, with each of those 5 skandhas, there's 10 associated demon states that you can enter. And the text is very clear about how this happens. Basically, it's because, 1, you're not pure in precepts. So if you're afflicted by demons of some sort, the first place you go to is to check out your purity and precepts. The second reason the text is very clear that one gets taken with these demonic states is because you are seeking something, you want something, some kind of power, some kind of special state that could be associated with cultivation, particularly meditation, and you want it, you call it in, and then you get it, and it twists you and you get stuck. So seeking anything or not being pure in precepts is the invitation to what they say, catching demons. Now, okay, so they were studying that text, and they were very wary about playing around with spiritual powers and seeking and things like that. So when we got to the New Testament, they said, did you notice how much of the New Testament and the Gospels is devoted to describing Jesus dealing with demons, subduing them, exorcising them, and so forth? And they would go from passage to passage, and they had a point. I mean, the Sermon on the Mount is really good. It's really wonderful, and it's kind and compassionate and loving. It's like metta, right? But then, not just interspersed, but as equally or maybe more, is this whole thing of displaying miracles and smashing demons. So they were, and of course I grew up with it, and when I grew up, I was with liberal Christianity. I was more along the Sermon on the Mount kind of thing. Love thy neighbor as thyself. What was some of the other ones? God is love, and so forth. But they picked up on this other side. So I'm just saying, this is not unique to Buddhism. You find it across traditions, and it's not always interpreted the same. So maybe others don't see them as just symbolic or metaphorical. They see them real. This is very complex. It could be inner, they could be outer, they could be either, they could be both. That phenomena. I will probably some other night say more about this, because there's quite a bit we can go into. But I would ask you to pay attention to people talk about, on the outer, possession, being possessed. I would say on the inner, we use a word that's very similar but a little different, obsession. So you have basically what a demon is having when you show a compulsive concern for something, as if you're haunted by it, you're taken by it, that obsession is very much the meaning of being possessed, which has to do, you're controlled firmly, you're dominated by. So whether that domination and control of your consciousness occurs because of some external device or being or entity, or because of an internal, your experience of that probably isn't that much different. Your psychological experience of that. And my teacher would say, yes, there are demons without, but they can't take hold unless there is, quote, quote, demon within. The poison without unites with the poison within. And he said, conversely, there's great and good and gracious beings out there, and the goodness without unites with the goodness within. So he said, simply cultivate your own goodness and your own light, and you won't have to worry about this. But he said, if you leave your doors and windows open, thieves will come in. And he wasn't speaking just metaphorically. But that's another night. I could tell you a lot about my experience with demons, and maybe you'd be interested or not. But for tonight, I think that's as far as I want to go. Okay. So we talked about the guiding master subdues multitudes. Using the mind of wisdom to smash all afflictions and obstacles. Now here, let me go back to the Chinese here.
I could say something that one.
Yeah, it's basically, E is taking or using Zhi Wei, wisdom mind, and then it's Po. And then the Ju is all. Fan Nao, afflictions, multitudes, right? I'm saying this for two reasons. One, from just a literary, textual language basis, Po doesn't simply mean smash. Okay? Po can mean, and I would rather this transform vigorously rather than smash. But Po can mean decisively break with. To po is to separate from, to decisively break with. It also can mean, very interestingly, to expose the truth of something. So here, now I'm talking, that's the language part. From my own personal experience as a beginning cultivator, it doesn't work in my psychology to think of smashing. And if I really get into smashing and destroying, it's actually an affliction in itself. It's a state of mind that, first of all, I start fighting with myself, and then pretty soon I start fighting with others, and pretty soon I'm fighting with everything. Because it's me against all these. And the against thing, the opposition thing, is the opposite of really what you need to be doing, which is the compassionate side. That's why I think this line at the end, he proclaims the one, kindness and compassion. So what you do is you decisively break with or expose the truth of, with kindness and compassion, the root of those afflictions. And by doing that, you liberate them. This is what Hui Neng means by crossing over your afflictions. Because by smashing them, nothing's produced or destroyed within this Dharma realm. I mean, it's like the conservation of matter and energy, right? You just transform it. Smashing things breaks things. It creates bad feelings. Try smashing your enemies and they go away. No, they come back to haunt and get even and revenge. But moreover, it creates in you a mind of fighting, of win and lose. And it's really, I don't think this is a skillful translation. I would go with something like decisively break with your afflictions and obstacles, expose the truth of, separate from, transform, anything like that for Po. Yeah.
And then see through.
Maybe you got to do it
See
loud
through.
because...
See through, like you see through something, that's often a phrase, can't pull.
Mm-hmm.
Can't pull, you see through.
To see through,
See through.
which follows along, expose the truth
Yeah,
of.
exactly.
Yeah. So I'm saying, even if you have to, you would insist that that's only one way of working with poets to smash, I would say in your commentary on your own experience, teaching yourself and teaching others, you do not want to emphasize this. It really is a kind of violence. And as Lao Tzu said, show me a person of violence who comes to a good end and I'll take him as my teacher. So I would back off of that. But I will look at my teacher's commentary here, which this is what I do. I look at the text, I try my best to wrestle with the Chinese, I look at the previous translation, and if it resonates with the words and my experience, I sort of okay with it. But if I get a little rub, I say, that doesn't seem right. Then I go back and look at the original Chinese, and I also go back to the commentary and see if there's anything. So here I take from the commentary. This is from my teacher. Why is it that all living beings are not Buddhas? It's because of their obstacles and afflictions. That's the afflictions and obstacles of this line. But as soon as you can transform your afflictions, your wisdom will appear. He didn't say smash. As soon as you transform them, because basically your afflictions are your frozen enlightenment. So you melt them. You don't smash them. And then as soon as your afflictions are transformed, wisdom will appear. And in one thought, you'll see all. Everything will be. This is the same thing as with one thought, unproduced Chinese, the entire substance manifest. But it means something closer to the still, pure mind, the universe surrenders. Everything becomes clear then, because that mind has no obstructions and no impediments anymore. Okay, so I would go with a re-rendering of that poem. Yeah, we got about 5 minutes. I was going to tell a story tonight, but I'll save it for next week on dealing with demons. Demons with Heng Sure and I encountered on the pilgrimage. So we'll do that next week. I'd rather have a chance for one of the monks to come up and talk tonight. And if you want, in the future, I can talk more about the demons from my experience. I was quite good at encountering and catching them. And this is not something I wish to brag about. It's actually showing how foolish I was and didn't listen to instructions. So my experience is because of incaution. But we'll do that next time.
Lock, how it look like?
Yeah, it's good.
It's good, okay.
So as Marty was speaking, one story actually came up in my mind I thought really illustrates this principle. I don't know if people have read the Pali Canon very much, but there's a story in there that was really striking to me because it talks about subduing Mara. And the story is, I think, Majjhima Nikaya 50, titled Rebuke of Mara. And it begins with Venerable Mahamaggaliyana, who is the foremost disciple in spiritual powers, an arhat, right, an awakened being. And so he's doing walking meditation, walking back and forth. And Mara wants to disturb him. So what does Mara do? Mara is often translated the kind of the king of the demons, right? The kind of demonic, the worst possible energy you can find. So he goes into Mahamaggaliyana's stomach to disturb his meditation. And Mahamaggaliyana immediately detects something that's not quite right. And he has this spiritual vision. He looks and says, I see Mara. So he tells him, Mara, I see you. Get out. Mara is thinking to himself, he can't see me. Even the Buddha couldn't find me so fast. And Mahamaggaliyana goes, Mara, I know you're thinking that I can't see you, but I see you. Get out. And so Mara, okay, he goes out and he comes out and he hides, nearby. And then he's gonna try to disturb from nearby. And Mahamaggaliyana looks at Mara and says, Mara, I still see you there. He goes, no, you couldn't see me here. I'm the king of demons. You can't see me. He says, Mara, I know you're thinking that you're really powerful, but I see you right there. And then what's really interesting is what Mahamaggaliyana says to Mara. He says, Mara, don't think you're so powerful, because you're actually my nephew. And I'm reading the sutra, right? It's like, what? Mahamaggaliyana says, yeah. He says, I'm your uncle. you know your mom? I forgot her name. It was something like Kasi or something. And his name was Dusi, I think. Dusi. Dusi. At that time, I was Dusi, your uncle. And your mother was my, I think Kasi. And you're my nephew. And there was a Buddha at that time that was, how many eons ago. And I was Mara. I was you during that time. And I caused that Buddha and his disciples a lot of problems. Right? He describes all the problems he caused the Buddha, to the point where he actually caused somebody to throw a rock that broke open one of the monks' heads open. And he says, at that point, I went down into the lower realms and suffered for many, many eons. And he described that. And he said, however, over all these eons, I've gotten out, I've cultivated, and I'm free. He says, however, you actually had a lot of suffering in store for you. You've got to be careful. And to me, it's a very kind of amazing sutta, because it's exactly this principle here, which is, in many traditions, what do you do with demons? You catch them and then you crush them, like what Marty just described. You smash them, right? But here, Mahamagdhyana actually talks to the demonic energy like family, and tries to teach, and teaches through his own personal experience, right? Identifying with the demon's current state and saying, you can actually change. I did. And so that puts the whole context of what demons are in the Dharma in a very different light, because sometimes we make good and evil very, rigid. There's good and there's evil, and you have to get rid of the evil and you have good. But in Dharma, as you can kind of see from this particular passage, it doesn't quite work that way. If you get rid of the evil and only have the good, somehow something's kind of broken, because we're kind of hiding a part of experience from ourselves. Rather, it's in the melting of what's, you could say, diluted to the kind of the fullness of the nature. And it's a very different model. And so to me, Mahamagdhyana in the story really embodies, you could say, this courage, this strength, this invincibility. And because of his kindness and compassion, he's able to subdue Mara. And I think the other thing that's striking about this story is actually that the most evil force, when you use the word evil, the most negative force in the universe, in the Buddhist kind of cosmology, can actually get enlightened and become the foremost disciple of the Buddha. So I thought that was just maybe one quick story I think that quite applies to this situation. There's maybe one more story if there's time. This is recent, because Jing Weisher and myself have been doing a pod on the 4 hearts. We call it the 4 fearless hearts, because we were saying that loving kindness, if you really think about it, that's not attached, then has no fear, because fear comes from, you could say, expectations and wanting things to be a certain way. If we let go of all expectations, then there's nothing to fear. And there's this one story that we were watching. There was an interview, you could say, a peacemaker in throughout the world. He was actually, I think, the director of Amnesty International in Washington for a little while. And Nipun Mehta, who was in service space, was interviewing him just recently this week. And there's one story that really struck me. I think it really emphasizes this point as well, which was he gave a talk at the largest synagogue in Washington. And he was talking about the death penalty. And of course, Amnesty International is against the death penalty. So he was talking about that. And he said, he finished his talk, and there was Q&A. And this woman stands up, old woman. And on her arm, you could see the tattoos of the concentration camps. The number from the concentration camps. And she looks at him and says, I can see about not having the death penalty for those who commit an act of murder out of passion. But how about the Nazis who killed millions and millions of people? And he said, if I saw one today, I would kill him. I would snap his neck just like a chicken. And imagine that you're in a talk, largest Jewish synagogue in Washington. This woman stands up and asks this question. So he just paused and just waited and looked at the woman. He said you could hear a pin drop at the place. And he just waited and waited. And finally, he looked at her very kindly and said, I think you're far too beautiful to do that. And then he said what she responded was, she almost became like a 16-year-old girl. She melted. Just kind of went, oh, don't say that. And then she sat down. And he could see all the whole room sort of like laughter. But there was a nervous laughter, because they weren't sure what would happen. And I was listening to that story, I was like, wow, if I was stuck in that situation, I don't know how I would respond. And this is, I think, the same idea. Kindness and compassion. It's not fighting, but being able to see through the layers and layers of hurt and touch that place that, I know you have that beauty and that kindness inside. And so to me, that was like, it's definitely, if you want to watch an interview, you can watch that one. It's pretty amazing.
What's good about that,
yeah.
In terms of principle, it's really interesting, because the question is, where do demons come from? And in some stories, they're created or made by, but in the Buddhist tradition, they come from the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So where would a demon, his response is really right on, because he's saying, let me put it another way, you're too beautiful, your essential true nature is so beautiful and whole and complete. By doing that, you would disrupt it, you would tarnish it, you're too beautiful to do that. Even though the impulse to get revenge is there and it's strong, by going down that path, you will turn yourself into something that is no longer whole and beautiful. And so it's like, it is acknowledging her pain and her righteous anger, at the same time saying, but be careful how you respond, because you're not going to be punished in a religious sense for killing. In the Buddhist sense, you'll be punished by your killing. Your killing will in turn punish you. And that's a very different approach to it. Even though you can feel it's right, and you can't just ignore and deny it. You've got to be careful, because once you start down that road, you transform yourself into something that becomes the very thing that you were seeking to destroy. It's the elasticity of this is really interesting. I think that was a really beautiful response.
Yeah, I know. I was amazed.
Yeah.
Story after story are just like oh my goodness.
Wow.
It was completely goosebumps all the time listening to him talk.
One of the most powerful interview I ever saw.
Yeah.
This man was so into this truth, was speaking from the heart.
Yeah,
it's sentence after sentence, like poetry. And the man who was a witness, as someone who was a leader of the Amnesty International, he was in Beirut in Lebanon when there was massacre of the Palestinians in 1982. He witnessed in Rwanda all these massacres. He witnessed in Afghanistan, and he still kind of revealed this hope for humanity. That is some beauty.
Yeah.
What you are speaking is in us. That imagine for me is amazing. In the one thought, we can be removed from it, and just the darkness can cover that.
Yeah.
And it's so fluid. And for me, it's so resonate with me, because here the concept of evil, which Chuanshi says, is not ultimate and forever. You go to the hell, you never can be liberated. You can back is still a transformation.
Mhm.
We're saying, and it's today we are good, tomorrow maybe we don't know. And this who is very bad and want to smash him, he had potential to be bodhisattva. And it's, for me, this is kind of very amazing message that
Well, the agent here is you yourself.
yeah,
You know, when this text was going, it keeps going mind, the mind. Why is it talking about the mind? Why doesn't it talk about the higher powers? Because the mind is the agent of change. Your mind, not some other mind. So in addressing this woman, he's pointing her back to your agency is you, your mind, and not being controlled by those external environments. As soon as you go down that, you lose your agency, and you're still responsible.
yeah, and you even see this. The beauty was even before concentration camps, and this trauma maybe and pain covered it. And he touches the place when she remembered as maybe this teenager who just hang out with her friends and cultivate kind of virtue and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
Yeah, this is really good.
yeah.
By the way, this is somewhat off, but Mara, the story you told
Yeah.
about Mara,
Yeah.
you know there's a lot of Chinese Buddhist terms that come from Sanskrit, like Bodhisattva is Sanskrit, and that becomes Putisatto, which then becomes Pusa. And four
Yeah.
came from Fotoye, which was then transformed. But some people suspect that Mara,
Oh, yeah. I
that
see
Mo,
Mo Wang.
Moha, is actually from a transliteration of Mara. Rather, anyhow, all fun and interesting. So I hope nobody has nightmares tonight about demons and
Boy.
remembers how beautiful they.
Yeah, loving kindness. Use loving
Yeah.
kindness.
Any
That's what
announcements
subdues the demons.
before
Well,
we transfer?
anything going on?
Normal.
I mean, I think maybe what we could say if people are part of our community is Zhao Mama. She's the elder at BBM who we've been going to recite the Buddha's name for the last, 20 years or 10 years? I know as far as I remember. She actually just passed away. And so she passed away, I think, about 100, a little over 100. And very vigorous cultivator, cultivating the Pure Land. I heard stories that whenever she had people come visit her, want to pay her well, she's, don't talk to me, we're just going to recite the Buddha's name together. She'd come for the 8 precepts here.
Obviously not on Facebook.
Not on Facebook, yeah. And so, but we're going to have a memorial service for her, probably next Sunday. So not this Sunday, but 11th, 13th, 14th, 21st. March 21st, I think at 3 p.m. So if people are interested, I think we might just use the BBM, Zoom. Just BB online Zoom link, because that's probably, everyone knows that already. So yeah, if you want to join in that, I think that quite a lot of our community will come, because she was, people actually, we went there for many years, every month.
If
Yeah.
you want to hear some stories from Bowing Pilgrimage, you can turn on 7:15.
15. Oh yeah,
Every
every
day we're
morning.
reading the
You
journals.
can hear Marty and Verhoeven Heng Sure stories on the highway, smashing demons.
Smashing demons.
Literally.
Catching demons.
Catching demons.
Marty just said recently, I let go everything but food.
Yeah, yeah. We read a lot about food. actually.
Yes.
We read a lot about food.
I can
Okay.
resonate with that.
Sugar, yeah. Sugar. Okay. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain.
May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bow in respect to the three jewels.
Okay, wish everyone good evening. Amitofo.